Shen, you can proceed.
Sorry, give me a second. Should I begin now?
Yep.
No worries. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the HSC Exam and Mental Health Challenges to Australian Youth livestream. My name is Jan Ali and I'm the Young Innovators Club coordinator. And however, more importantly, I am also a HSC student myself who will be having his first exam like many other students within October. Right now, students like me and you are probably at home studying, some of us worrying over getting a high ATAR. Many students right now, we have a pressure from our parents, our peers, and our schools over performing well in HSC. And we also feel some pressure on ourselves. Why? Because we want to get in a specific institution, maybe a specific university, for a course or subject we want to learn in. But it's important for us to manage our own mental and physical health properly. And to discuss this and to explore more about this, we have panelists such as Dr. Habib Burawala, who is a senior consultant and pediatrician and health of pediatrics department at Nepean Hospital. We also have e-health and e-learning promoters and experts such as Dr. Puram Kayani, Dr. Sunayba Rakazi, who's also a youth psychologist and former. And we also have with us our former HSC students and high achievers such as Anas Rehan. And these people will be joining us in a panel discussion where we'll be answering questions students like myself and others will have. And this is just a few people that are with us today right now. We also have some of the team from Young Innovators and our Young Innovators Club. That would be myself, Ayan, and also Zawiyar and Sharmeen. These people are working in the background. And if you have any questions to any of the panelists, please try and mention the name of the panelist you'd like to ask the question to. And also follow it up with the question, and we'll have Sharmeen and Zawiyar. They will both try and forward all of your questions to us over here, and we'll try to answer all of them. And before I continue, I'd also like to mention we're also proudly sponsored by GTech Solutions, who are your one-shop and one-stop solutions for all your software and social media needs. Now, we also do have a HSC, Shafik, do we have the slideshow on the screen? Beautiful. I think the spotlight's also on you right now, so I don't know if you can fix that, but I'll just leave that to you. So before we move forward, I'd also like to mention once again, as you can see on the screen right now, we do have one big HSC Success Secrets workshop, and this will have 4 parts to it, which will be how to plan your HSC, which is for year 10 students, how to actually start your HSC, what you need to worry about in terms of routines, so that's for year 11 students. We also give advice on how to keep your HSC on track, as well as we have another workshop for exam success secrets, which is for year 12 students such as me and you, who are going into HSC. Now, before I continue, I'd like to give a rundown of what is going on. So some quick housekeeping, which would be that we'll introduce each main panelist with us, and we'll have them talk about their own experience, and we'll have a Q&A session straight after that. After that, anyone who's with us right now, try and stay muted if you're not speaking, and that will be myself included. If a panelist is speaking, I'll try to mute myself, and we want them to make sure they are able to say everything without anyone else interrupting. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat and we'll try to answer them. And once again, we will have Zawiyar from our team. He will try and ask the questions later on. He'll try and read through chat and organize through all of your questions and ask them after we've gone through all the panelists and all the main questions we have. So once again, don't hesitate to ask any questions. We do have people here to talk as well. Starting with one of our first panelists, which would be Dr. Habib Burawala. As I mentioned, he's a senior consultant and pediatrician, and he has a strong interest in teaching and education. He's also a senior clinical lecturer at the School of Medicine. the University of Sydney. He teaches medical students at the University of Sydney and is the University of, I don't know how to say that, Notre Dame medical schools in Sydney as well. And Dr. Habib also works with us, and he is a great help in the community as well. So I would first like Dr. Habib to tell us a little bit about his experience with working with different students and different youth. And I'd also like to know, what is your experience with dealing with mental health challenges to Australian youths? And this is in reference to like our HSC, and the exam stresses and pressures that come to students as well. So could you tell us about your experience with working and fighting against these?
No, thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction, and thanks for inviting me and opportunity to contribute. Yes, it is an important time, HSC preparation exams, and certainly it's a very stressful time for the students such as yourself and many others. In terms of my experience working with children, so I have, apart from just the exam, there are lots of reasons why the young people and children get stressed or have difficulties with number of areas, and any triggers which might make it worse, such as exams, in not just HSC but any exams or any assessment can be stressful, and that can affect the physical health and mental health and emotional well-being, and all of those are linked to each other. So if you are stressed, your body also responds differently. It secretes certain hormones, and while occasionally some of those hormones and some of those changes are good, it's not good for long term because it can start to affect you negatively. So your emotional health and psychological health and well-being also affects your physical health, and vice versa, the other way around as well. And why I say that is, so when we talk about any stress management, and in particularly HSC, my experience is often it is really basic, simple routines and simple tips and strategies. They're still important, and there's still we need to stick to it. And some of those I've already mentioned, and I might just expand a little bit more on that. So some of the key aspects for all the students out there, HSC and other students as well, there are certain, simple strategies you can do to try and improve everything. And the most important is your sleep. So if you sleep adequately, your brain is refreshed, focused, and you need really good sleep. You need at least 8 hours, in younger children, even more than that. And you can't compromise with that. So if your schedule is currently is that you're only having 6 hours or 7 hours, I would suggest you go back and you try and have adequate sleep. It is really, really important. That would start to, I think, improve all other bits. So your capacity to focus during the day, your capacity to carry out the task and read properly, all of that is important. So I would, sorry, am I muted? No?
No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So all of those are important. And I think starting from good sleep, and then, coming during the day and having regular breaks, having some physical activity. So have exercise or a walk or any activity which is going to keep you physically fit. You can't neglect that. You can't neglect physical health for the exam pressures and others. And then you just, it just one problem leads to other. I would just highlight this because these are potentially can affect your health, physical health as well. So the stress so you might not be doing activity, you may not be sleeping properly, and then that start to create medical problems. And then we as a medical doctors then start to get involved. So, I mean, in summary, I would just mention that having a regular routines, having regular breaks during the day, exercise, sleep, healthy, nutritious eating. So eating well, properly, not overeating, not undereating, and making sure that it's healthy and nutrition. It's a fuel for your brain. And you need to have it properly. You can't neglect again, and you just have equal attention. So while you focus on study, and yes, it is important, you don't neglect your bed, your mind and body, because they all work together in harmony. So I think that's where I will leave it, and then maybe other speakers might want to add. And then if there are questions, we can come back.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. Habib Borawala. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Karam Kiani. He is strategically driven and heading the enterprise level L&D. He'll know a lot more about this than I do, and clinical applications and services and e-health in New South Wales. He is also a great advocate for future technologies, digital transformations, and he also talks a lot about e-learning, project management, change management, instructional designs, and learning and development, especially for students as well. He's also a great parent of two amazing mashallah children and one more as well. So that's 3 children in total that he's a parent of. And Shafkat, do we have the slides up here?
No, it's okay. Let's keep going.
It's fine. No worries. Okay. And I'd like to just pose the question to Dr. Kurumpiani about his own experience with his children, especially because I'd like to know a little bit about his experience as a parent for his children, how he helped his children, and how he also guided them, and what sort of things you saw or noticed with them, and how you actually tried to work with that. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Can you unmute, Doctor, please?
Is it okay now?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, Shayan and Shafkat Ali Saab, I'm really grateful for giving me this opportunity to share a few of my thoughts with you. I was listening to Dr. Burewala Saab, and all the points he mentioned are they are really very, very important for the HSC students. I'll cover more from being a father point of view, like what I did differently to ensure that my kids, they perform better. The first thing was that we have to understand that our system, like in Pakistan, is different from this HSC. In Pakistan, if you don't score well in a FSC, it means that's the end of your world, right? So you'll not end up in a doctor or maybe engineer, but over here, you get a lot of opportunities throughout your life. So HSC is not the end of the world. So don't stress and push your kids to the point where they will feel that if they will not score 99.5% or 95.4%, this is the end of the world, right? I'll give you the example of my kids. My 3 kids, they are different. Like my daughter she's a very high achiever. My second son is a very high achiever. My third son is a middle achiever, like he's mediocre, right? But he has other very strong aspects. Like he's very strong practically. So what I did was, instead of pushing him into a field which he didn't like, I asked him to select the field that he liked, right? So this is the first thing. And another thing that I suggest that I learned a lot from my father was the listening skills. Because we all speak very well. We speak for hours, we preach, we give excellent lectures. When it comes to listen, especially with our kids, we don't listen. We believe that we are there to just preach them or guide them, or it's a one-way traffic. So what I did was, whenever my kids, like, I think I never remember any incident when my kids were with me and they started talking, and I didn't put the telephone or mobile phone aside, because for me he's the most important thing, right? Just as we listen to our boss, as we listen to our friends, we should listen to our kids, right? And that will give them the comfort, especially during the HSC exams or during the preparation of that. Second thing was that I realized that if the kids, they adopt or select the field of their parents, they get a lot of success because they already get the network. So my daughter, she went into IT, so she got all the benefits, like she got internship from a dynamic web training. My son went into pharmaceuticals, like pharmacy. He got all the network of my wife. So that is another thing that we should encourage our kids to select the field of ours. And another thing is believe that there is always a tomorrow. Tell them if they will not score well, that's fine. There is always a tomorrow. So this is not the end of the world, right? They will always get another chance. So that will calm them, right? And they will perform better. And as Burewala Sahab very rightly said, that physically strength is also very important. So all my kids, they were into sports. They played cricket, hockey at a very professional level. So what I mean is like to perform educationally well, you have to perform physically well also. So I think these are the thing. And last thing is that be friend to your kids, right? Spend your quality time with your kids when you're fresh. Normally what happens is that we give the best time or the quality time or the fresh time to our friends or maybe in social networks. And when we come back home, then we sit with our kids when we are tired and we are not in a mood to listen. So I think these are the tips that we should follow. And I'm very positive that they will definitely help our kids a lot and perform better in the HSC exams. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kurumkayani. Now, I'm also going to introduce Anas Rehan, who is a first-year university student, and he was a former school captain and won the 80th Long-Tan Community Leadership Award, and he was nominated for the Olympic Change Maker. He also had a DUX in school for 2 consecutive years, and he's also a student from my own school who also graduated, as I mentioned, just recently. So Anas, I didn't really prepare a question for you, but I'd like you to talk about your own experience as a student and what challenges you had to face and how you dealt with those challenges as well. Anas, you there?
Yep, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, so my name is Anas Rehan. I'm a first-year student in UTS. I'm studying civil engineering. And last year HSC would probably be, I would say, one of the most challenging years because of COVID. I'm sure you guys heard last year about halfway through the year, everyone went back home and we never went to school again. So we had to continue our learning online. So that was definitely a big challenge. Yeah, I would say that was the biggest challenge, COVID. About me, and if I were to give advice to a student, I would say is having a detailed goal. And what I mean by that is knowing exactly what you want to do, why you want to achieve your goal. Like if a lot of students, they tell me, I want to get an ATAR above 95, above 96. And I say, all right, that's a really good goal, but why do you want to achieve that? And then they buckle. They're like, well, hang on, I just want to have the number. I'm telling you that number won't matter to you in a few months. What I want students to realize is that they need to have a goal. For me personally, it was civil engineering, and that required an ATAR of about 84. It's not too high. It's not crazy high. It's nothing like a doctor or anything, but it's still a pretty high requirement. So what I did, I added 10, and I told myself, okay, I'm going to get a 94. I didn't get a 94, but I got a 92. But whatever your goal is, add like another 10, 15 points above it and aim for that. Because whenever you set a goal for yourself, you're always going to fall short by a bit. And that is just something that's been proven. Not sure why, but that's how it is. So once you have what you want set into mind, you have a set target that you want to achieve. Imagine you're doing archery and you have a bunch of targets in front of you. And I told you to hit one of them. You're going to be very confused and you're not going to know what to do. But if I told you hit that specific target, you will know exactly what you're going to do. You would study in a way that is more refined in a way to your own goal, what you want to do. And that is the best advice I can give to any HSC student. Figure out what you want to do and just go for that. And if you don't get the ATAR, that's completely fine. Australia, as the doctor mentioned earlier, Australia has so many opportunities. HSC is not the end of the world. We have tons of options. Even if you want to get into doctor, there are still other options. You don't need a 99.95. If you get it, yes, that's good. You can get in straight away, but there are other pathways. It might take an extra year or two, but if you really wanted to do it, you can go for it. There's nothing wrong with not getting a desired ATAR. It's not the end of the world. And that's all I have to say. HSC is not as big as people assume it to be. Yes, it's best if you can get in first try, but if you can't, that's okay. You have another year ahead of you. It's not the end of the world.
Thank you, Anas. I appreciate your time here as well. And I would also like to introduce another panelist, which would be Dr. Suneber. And Suneber Ghazi is a registered psychologist with experience in working with both primary and high school students. And she's addressed many she's addressed and also presented more about mental health concerns, including depression, anxiety, grief, and trauma in young people especially. and she aims to help students to find ways to manage the different emotions young people can experience and find a balance in life for them. Now, Dr. Suneber, I'd like to know more about what have you experienced, especially what have you seen in Year 12 or high school students going into HSC, and what sort of troubles you've seen them face, and what sort of solutions would be ideal for them.
Thank you so much for, first of all, inviting me to be a part of this panel. I feel very honoured to be here and to share my experience, not only working with students, but also what I suggest to them and the recommendations that I do share. So yes, I worked for quite a few years with high school students with a range of different presenting problems, like you mentioned some of them, but the main ones are usually stress, depression, and anxiety. And like the doctors were mentioning previously, there's a lot of many different reasons why young people can feel quite stressed and anxious, but around exam times and any test times, anything that's a big major life change, yes, the stress and the anxiety can definitely peak, and I'm obviously there to help those students manage those different feelings and emotions, because it's going to be many times in life we feel anxious, many times in life we feel stressed. It is a part of life. It's about how do we manage it. So my approach is always, we're not going to get rid of stress completely. We're not going to ever get to a point where we'll never feel anxious and we'll never feel stressed. It's more about, okay, this is what I'm facing. How do I manage it from here on out? So, I mean, I guess we want to start off with like, what is stress? What is anxiety? Our anxiety is pretty much a fight or flight response. We need that to survive. But when it becomes a concern is when we get that reaction, but there is no perceived danger in front of us. So when we're feeling quite lightheaded, our heart starts beating fast, our palms start getting sweaty, and there's no perceived danger, and we're just thinking about our exams and we're getting that response, that's not what we want. We want to be able to manage it. And what happens when it comes to anxiety, and especially about exams, is that anxiety tells us that the problem is much bigger than it is. It over-exaggerates the problem and it underestimates your ability to deal with it. So when we get into that heightened state, emotional state, it'd be quite hard to concentrate. We can get, lead to panic attacks. I hope that doesn't happen for many students, but it can lead to that. We can start to blank out when we're sitting at the exam paper, what's going on, the stress builds up. So of course, understanding that is always a first step, but it's okay. What do you do to overcome that? So all the other panelists had some really good points about setting goals, about, healthy lifestyles, about, knowing that it's not the end of the world. It can definitely feel like that. But when we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about stress, there's different facets in managing it. But it's about recognizing it and then knowing what to do. So do we need to take some brain breaks? Do we need to go for a walk? Because we know getting out in fresh air, exercising, as the doctors were mentioning, releases hormones in the brain that makes us feel better. Do we need to take a break and go and have a snack? So we can always feel like we have to sit in our room and study and just go hard and hard and hard. Is that actually going to help you remember anything, retain anything, commit it to long-term memory? Probably not. We have to pace ourselves. We have to be realistic in how much we can do in a day. We have to have a balance. We need to check in on our friends when we need to. If we find a friend might be getting isolated, are they also buckling under pressure? Do we need to check in on them? But also knowing that there's a balance, and that's not always our responsibility to take care of everyone around us. But making sure we're sleeping well, like the doctor was mentioning. If we don't sleep, then it's going to be quite hard to retain anything, hard to study, hard to keep focus. Also, having a day in a week to do the things that you enjoy, whether that's reading a book or, like I said, exercising or doing something that's enjoyable, so you have something to look forward to as well. When we feel high moments of anxiety, high moments of panic, especially if we're walking into the exam or we're coming up to that pointy end of things, trying to be really mindful, bring ourselves back into the present moment, whether that's a bit of deep breathing, focusing on your breathing, focusing on what our body is doing, what our mind is doing. Progressive muscle relaxation is really great for that. So we go through all the different parts of our body and just relax those muscles, because we can tense up. I know when I get really stressed, I keep all the tension in my shoulders, dropping that down, being being aware of your surroundings, knowing that you're safe, centering yourself, and then moving forward. So it's, you know, it's quite easy for me to sit here and say that, you know, put all these things and you'll be fine. Stress and anxiety, especially around the HSC, is a bit of part and parcel of it, especially if you have those goals you really want to achieve. But we also have to focus on what we can control and what we can't control. We can control how much you study and how well you study, but at the end of the day, we try our best. And like all the other panelists have said, it's really not the end of the world. There are so many other options to achieve your goals. And, you know, just one final thing I would like to mention. I know a lot of people can find parental pressure can get quite a lot. And I think open communication in those moments is really important to share and be open with what you're feeling and not to internalize it and try and deal with it ourselves. It's important to talk. Of course, I'm an advocate for talking. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be in this profession. So talking, being open with how you're feeling, with the pressures you're feeling, with ways to manage that, I think that's also really important. But yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Snowber. We also have a surprise guest with us today as well. And we also have my own principal, Miss Luthra, and she'll be with us. And she is an amazing principal. And I've had her, I think, since year 4. And since then, she was amazing. She was very supportive to all the students.
Shane, face the camera.
Oh, yeah, sorry. She was very supportive to all the students. And so, Miss Luthra, could you tell us about your own experience, especially with all the grades you've seen, all the generations of kids that have been in your school as well? Could you tell us how it was like helping them, guiding them, what the experience is like observing the students, and what your advice would be to other students as well, and other principals and teachers as well?
Good afternoon. My name is Anai Luthra and I'm principal of Al Faisal College in Campbelltown. I have been having HSC students with me since 2013. So this is almost 10 years now. And every year is different. So every year the stresses are different. Like as Anas was just saying, last year we had COVID pressures, even the year before, you know, it was just starting off. My advice to everyone would be, you know, from the school's perspective, you need to trust your school. Your school is there to help you. I do find sometimes the students are not able to be, you know, they're not able to trust the school to the extent that we would want them to. The teachers are there to help. And I find that, you know, some kids are very, very hesitant in asking questions. The only way to get rid of your stress is to be able to have a good relationship with the school as well, so that you are actually able to ask questions whenever you need to ask questions. You are able to have a relationship with the teachers, because teachers are all there for you. So technically they are there because of you. So you need to feel comfortable to be able to ask questions, because and the other thing that I would say is to do past papers consistently. So I actually had a student who asked me just recently, Miss, so how do I do past papers? And I actually had a heart attack. So yeah, so you need to start with doing past papers right from the beginning, so that you can actually see where you need to work a little bit more. So so past papers, do constant past papers, get a feedback from the teachers, do past papers, get a feedback, do past papers, get a feedback. This is the only mantra actually to be able to succeed academically. Of course, with all the stress and everything, you've already heard the other panelists. So I'm actually talking to you from the point of view of the school. The other thing is, we had the, I think Dr. Burawala was talking about sleep routines. Yes, sleep routines are very important, but it is also what time you sleep. So recently I actually interviewed each one of my year 12 students to see what problems they are having. And one of them was waking up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then starting to work at 4 o'clock in the evening, and then going on until 2 o'clock in the morning. So and then waking up again at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What that actually does is, when you do HSC, your exam time is 9 o'clock. So if you set up your body clock to 2 o'clock, being like being alert at 2 o'clock, that's when you're going to be alert. You will not be alert at 9 o'clock in the morning to do your test. So you have to have proper sleep routine where you actually follow your body clock to the extent that you're able to be alert at 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you are waking up at 4 o'clock in the evening and going on until late in the morning, it will actually not be, it will not lead to success. I've had that experience in the past. The other thing is as well, when you have, I've had a student who told me, Miss, when I look at the content that I have to study, I really get stressed, and then I stop studying. So the thing for that is, as I was telling my students as well, for at least 3 days, follow a set routine. So you wake up at a particular time, you do 2-3 hours of past paper, have some relaxation, then go through the paper that you've actually done, like marking the paper and thing, have relaxation, have your dinner, go for a walk, and then do another 3-4 hours of studying. So if this simple routine is followed, especially maybe 2-3 months before HSC, there is no way that you will not be able to succeed, because having a set routine and having relaxation and physical activity in the middle is the key to success. So I basically do think that, and if you're feeling guilty, or I'm not studying, just get to it. So as I say, to be able to get that willpower for 2-3 days, you have to do things that you don't want to do, and you actually would develop the willpower that is needed. So so basically those are my things that I would like to say. Trust your school, ask your teachers. If the school has a counselor, go see the counselor, get some study tips, set a proper timetable. If you have a timetable, it will really help, because that way you know exactly what you're doing at what time. It is when you don't know what you're doing that the guilt starts coming in. And do past papers. So do past papers, as I said earlier, and get it marked from the teachers, get feedback from the teachers, because they actually will tell you how you can change the questions there, like your responses. Because sometimes just between a 3 mark and a 4 mark, there's just a difference of a keyword. So if you are able to show the teacher the response that you are ready with, and they just tell you, or add this keyword, suddenly from 2 marks, you get a 4 mark. So because it's a very mathematical kind of marking that HSC markers do. So just with changing a few responses, you can actually get a higher mark. So, and basically you just have to hang in there, because as everyone has said, it is not the end of the world. These days, even low ATARs are, universities are actually accepting low ATARs as well. So it is not the end of the world. If you want it, you will get it. So do the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss. Now, I'm going to move forward with some questions directed to the panelists from myself after listening to each one of them. Now, I'm going to go in a similar, wait, before I do that though, I would also like to mention that we do have one more person with us, and that will be Shafqat Ali. I did mention him 1 or 2 times during the stream, and Shafqat Ali is also with us at Young Innovators. He helps us, he guides and mentors students as well. And he's also a very important, key person, in my opinion, in the community. And I'd like Shafqat Ali to talk about his own experiences with working with children, with guiding children, and what advice he would give to students right now in Year 12. You're muted. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Sean. And it's not really nice to listen if son flatter dad. That's not happening. I want to thank all the panelists, especially Dr. Krumkani. He was from overseas. He's attending someone visiting in a hospital, but he's still committed to come on. And Dr. Habib, a long time our mentor and supporter of our initiative. And welcome to the Snowbird to come on board and help us in this particular session. And Anas is recently met, is a great. And Dr. Sonali Ludra, she is everything for my children at least. I want to just add 2 things, what she's touched on it. And looks like she's been to our workshop, but she stole all the notes we share in there. To get a stress-free anything, you need to have expertise on that. If I know what I'm doing, then there's no stress. When you go into unknown territory, think about your eyes are closed and you have to walk. After 10 seconds, you will be feeling panicking. To get that, to overcome, what she said is to have a routine. That's it. There's no other shortcut. And in our workshop, I want to highlight only one thing, but I could say this year we added that. It's called boosting breaks. The challenge with the study nowadays, you're studying on a computer most of the time, not books, not writing anymore. Mostly you're in front of computer. And when you get a break, the biggest mistake we do, we also take a break on a computer, playing, socializing, watching, not realizing this had need a bit of oxygen, bit of more energy, bit of change as well. Your left and right brain, they all at the end of the day is a physical thing. So we invented boosting breaks, which is like 5 minutes to 15 minutes. And we have a list of them as well. We can share, it's all in the recording on Facebook as well. You can go, and I wrote a few articles on that. Boosting breaks mean my principal said, we advise in the morning, do a big chunk when you're fresh. It can be a trial paper nowadays because only 3 weeks. Every day you should target, at least in a week, you target 3 trial papers. That will give you confidence when you know, oh, I've done 90% today, I've done 92% today. So when you keep it, it'll give you more relaxing. You know, I know what I'm doing. And after that, take a break. It can be a pray, it can be a walk. That will give you relax. Your brain get refreshed or get oxygen also not been used. So stress all comes here. So similarly, you convert into chunks. So next 3-4 hours, you have a smaller chunks studying your other subject, focusing on the subject area, which is you thought in the trial paper, you need to revise a little bit more. So more you have a routine like this, and the nutshell in the final, I say, if you don't plan anything, is a plan for the failure. What is like a fail to plan is the plan for the failure, right? So that's about from my side what we learned. So look for the boosting breaks, and you make your own. You don't need a lot of resources. It's just thinking ahead how I'm going to refresh my body and brain. Back to you, Shia.
Thank you. I am just quickly looking at something. Sure. Beautiful. Give me 2 seconds. I will be with you in just a second. I'm just trying to make sure that we have questions. Now, Zaria, do we have any questions right now, or should I pose my own question before I move forward?
Sadly, we don't have any questions as of now.
That's fine. Just try and collect some questions from the comment sections. And while you're doing that, I will pose my own questions. Now, I'll start with questions directed at certain panelists that are here right now. So with Dr. Habib Burawala, you gave advice on having more sleep and also trying to balance ourselves in terms of like our own physical health, our own mental health, and also our own studying time as well. So this isn't just Dr. Habib Burawala, but I'd also like to ask Dr. Snowbir Ghazi, what would be the ideal balance between these two? In terms of like, how many study hours would you recommend? How much time do you expect someone to spend on themselves, keeping themselves healthy? And how much time should they spend on actually studying? I hope the question makes sense. So Dr. Habib Burawala first, I would like to know what you think in terms of how much time should we spend studying on a daily basis, and versus you know, doing exercise and other things to keep ourselves healthy physically and mentally.
Sure. Look, there isn't a set time that you should spend on study. It depends on individuals, you know, how long they take, how much they can spend, but we do know how much time everybody should be spending on, you know, sleep and physical activity, and we can look at some of the general recommendations. So I'll repeat again that we at least need 8 hours of sound sleep. I think Dr. Luthra made a really important point, and I think it's really relevant that we need to really stick to the routine around sleep as well. So you just shouldn't really be sleeping at midnight and waking up at 10 o'clock and whatnot, and it doesn't work that way. In fact, I might just a little bit expand on that, and some of you might know, but I do want to just mention just a bit of a more from the health perspective, medical perspective. I think as Dr. Luthra spoke about biological clock, I think is very, very important. And it is, you know, it's part of a body's internal clock that we also have a sleep and wake cycle. And it's the other name for it's circadian rhythm. So it's what it is that we have a master clock in the brain. And the master clock is directly kind of influenced by the environmental cues, especially light. This is why this sleep-wake cycle is really tied to the cycle of day and night. And if you properly align, that can promote consistent and restorative sleep. But when this rhythm is thrown off, as the example was given, that somebody is waking up at 2 p.m. and studying till 2 or 4 a.m. and back again, this can create significant sleeping problems. And then you have a problem in multiple other areas, including how your brain functions. So it's quite important to really make sure that we are not missing our natural cues of our biological clock of our body, because that's what is regulating the timing of all the bodily processes, including sleep-wake cycle, but also our need to have food, hunger, also our need to have regular physical activity. Coming back to the activity, I think the general guidance is around, that you should at least have 30 minutes to 60 minutes of good exercise. Doesn't really specify light to moderate or heavy, depending on what you're used with. So you don't also want to do a marathon if you've not done, any walking or running. So whatever works for everybody, as long as they're actually spending that time outside, having natural light, natural sun during the day, and it does help bring the stress level down. So I'd really like to say that we really have to, it is as essential as you're doing your study. So what we're doing, we are trying to just spend 10, 12, 14 hours on study, and we're just neglecting all of that time, which actually optimizes our brain capacity to study again. And why I say that, so we can't really focus, generally we can't focus more than 30, 40 minutes at a stretch. If you try to do that, say 2 hours constantly, you're not going to be able to do it. You will need a break. And break means so that it allows your brain to refocus. So I hope I've answered the question in a way that we're looking at 8 hours, nice to have 9, 10, whatever, but at least have around 8, not less, not too much too. You don't want to sleep 12 hours and so on and just disturb. What is more important is, are we sticking to the biological clock? And that's more important.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Ravi Burawala. You spoke about 8 hours of sleep. And I would also like to pose an extra question, because you did talk about sleep a lot here. So what if, I know students, especially myself as well, what happens is that some days you might wake up very late, for maybe because we slept late, or maybe because something was happening. And there's often a struggle on how can we fix ourselves or realign our sleep schedules. So what would be your ideal advice? So because you also need time to study and do tests, right? So you'd have to fit in your whole schedule. If you wake up late, you'd have to push everything forward. And what happens is that you end up sleeping late as well. So what would be your advice? Would you tell us that we should maybe like cut it out, leave it for the next day and move forward? Or do you think we should do something else? Do you have any specific advice on this?
That's a very good question, actually, and it is very important. So what you need to do is, you can't change your biological clock overnight. It just doesn't happen. So what the suggestion is that you bring 30 minutes early every day. So say you've been sleeping at 11 o'clock and we need to actually get to 9 o'clock. So how you're going to do it, you're going to do over 4 to 6 days, 20 minutes, 30 minutes every day you're bringing early, and allowing your biological clock and your body to get used to it. Obviously, it would be very difficult if somebody is doing 2 a.m. because I think you only got a couple of weeks left, right? So you don't want to then, I mean, that's my general advice to anyone when we're trying to restore the rhythm and sleep-wake cycle, because you have to do small increments. You try and bring forward slowly and bring it back. So I would say over a couple of days, you need to, but it is important around your habits, because the habits then becomes a behavior. So you start with a small habit, then it becomes also small, here and there, and it becomes regular, and then it becomes a habit and it becomes a behavior, and then it's very hard to change a behavior because it's now fixed. But it is very important, and I think can I stress this enough again, that physical health, regular break, healthy food and nutrition, all of that is so important in your mental stress and bread. So if you fix all of that, which is actually much easier to fix it compared to the mental health and stress and trauma, because that needs much longer therapy and much more interactions and whatnot. So anything else you can do to try and make that better, even if there are small gains, that helps. Every small bit helps.
Yep, thank you. And I would now also like to shift the question to Dr. Sunaib Barghazi. And Dr. Habib Burawala spoke a lot about sleeping, why sleeping is important, why when we should keep ourselves physically healthy and keep our physical health checked in. But I'd also like to know from Dr. Sunil Barkazi, in terms of how much time should we spend doing physical activities, doing exercise, how much time do you think is ideal? And what is your experience working with different students? Do you have any average? Do you feel like it varies from student to student? So I'll pass to you now. And if you'd like to talk about sleep, you can also talk about sleep. That's completely okay.
Perfect. I think when it comes to activities, I think in regards to my experience, knowing that the students are sitting down and studying hour after hour after hour, I try to encourage them, like, please just have a break, 10 minutes, go outside, and then slowly increase that as well. I think everything in increments, and slow and steady wins the race as well. It can be, as the doctor was saying, every individual is different. So everyone's capacity to, to either study or to even exercise is going to be different. So there's not like one size fits all. It's about making that first step and getting out there and making those changes in your study schedule, or how you actually structure your day as well. So if you're looking at, like, I'm going to do 6 hours and then I'll get like 30 minutes of physical exercise, well, that's going to be a bit tricky as well. So it's about, as the doctor was saying, that there's only going to be a certain amount of time that you can actually focus. So it's important to, of course, start at a certain, with a certain amount of time, and then increase that as you go, because also if you flood and say you need to do like so many hours of activities, then that can also be overwhelming. So as the doctor just mentioned, I saw in the comments that 60 minutes is probably standard. I think that's a good place to start. But in my experience, it's actually getting the students to understand that is important to manage the stress and to manage anxiety. So I definitely take, of course, more of that mental health approach. So really understanding why they're feeling anxious, why they're feeling stressed, and finding ways to manage that. And of course, the physical exercise and the sleep routines are all part of that puzzle as well. But, I also talk about the emotions and the feelings side of things as well, and really go through what pressures are they feeling and how to work through that. So yeah, I think the doctors are probably best suited to talk about the actual physical activity and sleep, and maybe more on the mental health.
Before you go, I'll also pose another question here, and I'm just trying to quickly look at what I wrote down. So how can we help others when you see? Okay, so this is about helping other people as well, because when you're a student yourself, you might notice other people also might have any troubles. So I'd like to ask, what are some indicators that let's say we can tell that someone else isn't doing well. So I'd like to ask, what would be some indicators that they aren't doing well, or they're not coping well with something? And I'd also like to ask, how can we help other students if we know they're not performing well, or they're feeling a lot of stress? So I do know 1 or 2 students myself who are isolating themselves, but at the same time, they're not studying. It looks like they're just right now in their own bubble, they're kind of stressing themselves out. So I'd like to know, what can we do as students to actually help other students and other classmates as well?
Of course. So there's definitely a lot of indicators of poor mental health, or of people going through a lot of stress or change, anxiety, depression, trauma. You mentioned one yourself. Of course, isolation. If you find your friends would message you every day or every second day, and suddenly that's decreasing, then we can see a bit of a shift. When we do talk to them, if we find their demeanor, their tone, the things they talk about to be different, then that's also an indicator. But I think it's important to remember about as friends, of course, we want to help our friends, we want to be there for them, but it's also not our friends' responsibility to take care of us as well. So everyone would have heard about the whole "Are you okay?" day, checking in with your friends. Are you okay? What's going on? How are you feeling? Just really simple questions like that, reaching out and chatting to them, sharing your experience. Yeah, it is a stressful time. This is what I'm doing. This is what helps me. What have you been doing? Sort of trying to find out what they're doing as well. But also knowing that if you find that it's getting to a point where, like you said, they're isolating, but they're also not studying, they're really becoming quite withdrawn, it's about encouraging them to seek help as well. So go to your parents, go to your GP, go to your school counselor, school psychologist, chat to them, because they're the people who are actually going to be able to help them as much, because every student is going through their own thing. If you start adding the responsibility to yourself to say, I will help them get through it. Of course, as friends, you always are, but also knowing the limits of that as well. And if you're finding your friends are going through quite a, struggling mentally with their mental health, encourage them to seek help, encourage them to talk to people who will actually be able, who it's their job to help them through that as well. So parents, GPs, school counsellors, even private psychologists as well. I know that can take time and it's not something that's going to be, easy done, easy fix. But, even just taking that first step of talking to like their parents, opening that avenue of communication is really quite important. So, encouraging them to seek help and just checking in with them every so often gives you guys as students a little bit of a break as well. And sharing your emotions and being able to understand each other is also actually quite a bit of pressure off as well. Just being able to talk about it and saying, what, I can relate to you, and that's really helpful. That was a bit of a weight off my shoulders and I can sort of carry on with my day. But like I said, if we're looking at more of that extreme side of things, then really getting them to seek help and then knowing what your responsibility is to your friends, and sort of, where that line is as well.
Yep, appreciate it. So as Dr. Snowbird mentioned, talk to other people, make sure you get in contact with them. And if you notice any change in behavior, try and encourage them to talk to other people, whether it be teachers, whether it be your school counselor. And I noticed that, and what I'm going to mention now is that, so Dr. Habib Burawala is sending something in chat where he's typing in advice and giving us more information through chat. Now, the thing is, everyone who's joining with us live, they can't see Zoom chat. So what I'm going to allow everyone to do here is that if you'd like to chime in or just mention something, just mention your name, such as, let's say I'm myself. So Shian here, I'd also like to mention or add in something here. And then if the speaker has just finished their sentence and they're okay with it, then you can just chime in and mention something yourself. Why am I allowing everyone to do this now? Because there is a lot of information, because we have a lot of experienced people here, people with a lot of expertise here as well. And we want to make sure students who are watching, they get access to all the information they can get that will help them. So once again, if you want to mention anything or add in anything, just mention your name, chime in, give some advice or any experience you have as well. That's 100% fine. So I would like Dr. Habib Burawala to quickly just talk about the two things he sent in chat, because I know people online can't see it right now. So the first one was on physical activity. You mentioned about 60 minutes each. So could you talk about that first?
Sure. So, I mean, I think we spoke about it, that between 30 and 60 minutes is good. 60 minutes is ideal. And it doesn't really have to be 1 full hour. And as I've said, you really need to run a marathon. You just can do a small chunks of those activity. It can even be light activity like a walking, doing some task in the home, or going to your garden if you've got something, or doing some, whatever else it is. That's still good, because prolonged period of sitting, it's also not good. So in the same posture, say you're in a chair studying for 2 hours, 3 hours, you really need to have a break that and move away and so on. And then the other recommendation is, the 3 times in a week, you can have a more vigorous activity. What I mean is vigorous is that makes your heartbeat go faster. So something bit more, moderate activity, you would say, and that is again helpful. What this also does is, and it doesn't cover here, but it's very important, and I don't think we've touched on it yet, and I'm sure it's very relevant. Screen time, social media, distractions, phones, social media, iPad, devices, computer, chats with friends, chat with others, whatnot. It is very, very important that we somehow limit it, because it does eat into your study time in general. And that's another reason why we get stressed. Because if you start to see what is your productive time, what is your non-productive time, you start to see, well, why you are awake longer and why you aren't getting 8 hours sleep. It is because you're using 2 hours in other bits, which you could probably save. And that would mean you can increase your sleep time. Just coming back to the second, topic is around nutrition. And can I just stress this again? It is such an important, especially in this high stress and exam period, to have a balanced diet. So not too much. Also, you got to keep in mind, you aren't really that mobile. You're not active. You're still studying. You're sitting for hours and hours. So you want to make sure that you're having a good food, but also is not overeating or, digestion, because that would create problems. At the same time, you have to have all the, fresh fruits, fresh juice, some nuts, whatever it is, because all of these have important amino acids, antioxidants, vitamins. That is very, very important. And I mean, if you have gonna have a fresh juice, whatever seasonal fruits are, they're useful, they're helpful, and have the right combination of protein and carbohydrate and so on. That again is really important to build you up towards the exam, because you're at your peak health, physical health, which is going to enhance your mental health performance. So all of that links into each other. And I'll just touch base with Dr. Luthra said, I think connecting with your teachers, asking them help, and as she rightly mentioned, they are there for the students. While sometimes not reaching out, not having that conversation, not really, de-stressing is going to lead further. So having chats, I think the problem is sometimes the students don't, they feel shy, or they might feel that, well, this is really a stupid question, or I should really know this. If I'm going to ask my teacher or somebody or something, what they're going to think about me, that is almost about to finish, and how come you don't know that? I think we need to move away, because no one knows everything, and it's absolutely true. It is about, okay, what you don't know, you don't know. If you don't ask, you're not going to know, and you're not going to get an answer. So you have to ask to get. So I think, can I stress that again? Because not asking, not telling somebody, it could be your parent, it could be your friend, your sibling, your teacher. You have to have the communication and conversations going all throughout the period. That's how other people are going to find out how you feel, how they can help you. Otherwise, they just can't help you if they don't know.
I'm going to go to Ms. Luthra with another question, but before I go to her, Dr. Habib Burawala, could you give an example of what a good daily diet would be like? As in, if we're talking breakfast, lunch, dinner, because I understand that when students listen to your advice, when it comes to listening about we should incorporate these in our diets, it's sort of troubling to try and figure out what would the ideal diet actually be. So could you give a quick example? This isn't, this is just an example once again for everyone listening. This is only an example. You can have differences in your diet, but could you just give an example what a good diet would
look,
be?
I think the ideal diet, while the cultural and religious and other preferences can vary, what I'm trying to highlight is, as long as incorporated to have the right carbohydrate and proteins, some fat, and the fruits and veggies. So all the key components in the diet, how so some would have eggs and so on in the breakfast, which is good.
Yep.
You have to have some, you think about maybe some fresh juice, have some in the breakfast together. That's always helpful. Try and bring some veggies and fruit into the diet during the day. Maybe have some salads, just not your routine meal. Have something else together and so on. And then from time to time, you can have some grilled or some, some food you love. You can also have some little, some kind of wins. You can, indulge into something every now and then. It's okay. But during the day, you just have to have, like a light but healthy, nutritious food. Water is extremely important. And again, I'll say that's the best drink. So if you're looking at having a good drink during the day, 24 hours, having regular water really hydrates you. Also, it also flushes out all your toxins, and that's important as well. Eating on time is important. So not skipping meals or not delaying too much. Also not having very late dinner. That is again important. So in terms of the actual diet, it can be mix of, the meat, grilled, veggies, all of that. You can vary as well, different days and so on. But I wouldn't really fuss much about what exactly, but they need to really see that, do I have veggies? Do I have fresh juice or fresh fruits? Do I have some, the nuts and so on? Do I have some protein? I think that's important.
Okay, so a good mix in our diet, and also make sure to eat on time as well. Thank you. And now, Ms. Luthra, I'd like to pose the question here. So look, thankfully, this isn't a problem at our school as much as it is in others. But I wanted to ask, what can students ask their teachers, or what can students request of their teachers in terms of help? Because I do know I'm not going to mention any names, I'm not going to mention any schools, but I do know that sometimes you might not have teachers that are, let's say, performing as well when it comes to helping students, and they sometimes neglect students here and there. And because of that, students don't know what to request of their teachers. So what would you advise to other students listening to this? What should they request their teachers to do to help them out? Outside of just asking for advice, is there anything they can request from their teachers, such as trying to introduce a new program, such as trying to remind them to do something? So what other things students can request from their teachers right now to help them with their studying or routine?
Basically, anything that is academic can be asked. You know, in the past years, we've had some teachers who have been mentor teachers to students. So we actually allocated a set of a group of students to a particular teacher, and any problems that the students had, they were actually able to go to the teacher and ask them for that help. With all the, as I was saying, in the if they do the past papers, they can definitely ask them for feedback and any responses that are needed. So as I said, the teachers are there for the students. So technically, if they're not, you know, as you're saying, some teachers don't help, but that actually can be brought up by the parents. So teachers have to help the students, because that's why they're there. So any academic questions, any issues that they're facing, I would actually just recommend maybe having study groups as well. Just on the side. So if you have study groups, some, you know, the kids, the students who are doing really well, they can contribute to the students who are not doing that well, and while contributing, they actually reinforce their own learning as well. So it's not a waste of time for the students who are helping the other students in a group. So having study groups usually helps in mental health as well, because you're studying together, you're able to help each other out. You know, as you were asking earlier, what you can do to help your friends. Yes, maybe form a study group of 4 or 5 people, where each one helps the other. And, you know, when you're together, people are able to open up a bit more and tell about their problems as well. But as regarding teachers, you can ask teachers for any feedback that you require. You can email, so as our students do, they email their teachers with any questions. In fact, we get a bit disappointed when we don't get questions, because it shows us 2 things: either the student knows everything or the student is not studying. So when we are inundated with questions, that is when we think, oh, okay, the students are actually putting in the effort, because no one knows everything. And the more questions you ask, the better your responses for HSC would be. So yes, the teachers have to be able to give you anything that you actually require. So, you know, we can, even if you want help during school hours or after school hours, where, you know, we do after school classes, we do morning classes. So anything that you need, you should be able to ask the teachers, because that's what their responsibility is.
Okay, thank you. Miss, I'd also like to ask, from your perspective as a principal, what do you think, or what would you expect from students to study on a daily basis going up to our HSC now? How much time do you want them, or would you expect them to study during the day? Let's say just dedicated studying in terms of hours.
As one of the panelists was saying, that, you know, there's no set time as such, because everyone's capacity, everyone's capability is different. Some students can get a lot out of 2 hours, while some might not, because, you know, depending on what their retention of facts is and things. So as you're aware, we recently had interviews with every student, and I did give them a sort of timetable where we actually recommended around 9 hours if you are at home. So of course, if you're coming to school, then that time changes. But if you're at home, we did say do 3 hours of past papers, have some rest, then do 3 hours, have some rest, and then do 3 hours. So by doing this actually gets you to bed at night by around 10 o'clock. I would recommend 9 hours, but of course, end of the day, it is up to the student's capability.
Yep. And now we've had Ms. Luthra here talk. We've had Dr. Habib Rawala give his thoughts, and Dr. Snebra Kasi also talking about what students can do. Now, Anas, you are the one, let's say, ex-student here, and I would like to know more about your routine, what you did, and what your own experience was in terms of studying. What challenges did you face? Because we didn't really exactly get to touch on the challenges that you faced as a student. So could you tell us more about that, please?
Sorry, before you start, Enes, I would just like to say how proud I am of you.
Thanks so much.
You know, it's students like you that, you know, actually make what we do worthwhile. So thank you for everything that you have, you know, thank you for making us so proud of you. And also, you know, there are so many other students of mine in this seminar right now. So just wanted to let you know, I'm very proud of all of you, and you make me proud. Thank you, Enes, for everything you've done. Good job.
Thank you so much, Miss. Thank you for giving us the facilities to learn in your school. Thank you so much. Okay, so for me, my biggest, this is very ironic because everyone's talking about sleep. For me, I barely sleep. During the HSC times, there would always be like, I would sleep around 5 to 6 hours a day, sometimes 3. So that was my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge was to actually start sleeping early on time, because because of COVID, what I personally, I love the night. I find it to be my most active time. I like to get my work done at the night. So a few months before the HSC, I would stay up until 6 or 7 a.m. just studying, and then I'd sleep. Wake up at like 2 or 3 p.m. and then I'll pretty much repeat. And so the teachers found out about this. They told me that I should switch up my routine, because by the time HSC comes, it would be a big shock to me. Because if I'm as Ms. Luthra said, that you shouldn't stay up at night because all your HSC exams are in the morning. That's very true. So a few weeks before the HSC, I started sleeping earlier and earlier, and eventually I got back to a normal routine. And if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have done as well in the HSC. So sleeping was the biggest, I would say, trouble for me. Sleeping early, sleeping on time, and getting enough hours in. And sleep is the most important thing. From someone who doesn't sleep, I can tell you sleep is probably the most important thing. I would say that's the biggest issue I had in my time.
And besides that, was there anything else that you'd like to, let's say, tell to other students in terms of any challenges they might face and how to resolve them?
Well, the most common challenges that students might face would just be studying at home. Sometimes they feel like that their room makes them feel lazy. So what I would do sometimes, I would just literally go downstairs and sit in the dining room. I would study in the dining area. I would tell my mum, look, I'm just going to study here. You guys do whatever you want. I'd go to the dining room. Sometimes I'd sit in the garage. Sometimes I'd go to the library. I would always change up my location of studying, because personally, I don't like to stay in one place for too long. Some days I'd study in my room, the dining room, the garage, libraries, anywhere. Sometimes I'd maybe go near the school, because I don't know, sometimes when I'm near the school, I feel like I should be doing something there. It's just a mental thing. So maybe just get a change of environment. That could really help a lot.
And also, look, I don't think you'll have this problem, but I'll ask you anyways. When it comes to motivating yourself to study and trying to help yourself, because here's 2 things I'll just from my perspective, I'd say that when it comes to motivation, there's 2 things that affect it. So one is that you lack motivation, but sometimes when you think you lack motivation, it isn't because you actually lack motivation. It's because your diet's a mess or your sleep schedule is a mess. So that just ruins your physical health. And when you're not feeling physically well, you think it's because of it's a lack of motivation, but it's actually because you're not physically healthy in the first place. But I'll ask you, when it comes to a lack of motivation, what would you advise to students, or what would you tell them? Would you tell them to take a break? Would you tell them to just step back a bit? I'll just pass it to you.
Well, lack of motivation, like as you said, it only comes from 2 things. One, because you don't feel like doing it. That can either be because you're doing too much work, or because your diet's a mess, your sleep's a mess, something like that. So figure out why you don't have that motivation. And sometimes people like think of yourself, you have like a fuel tank. Like, you know, the more you go, the more your fuel tank gets emptier. And by the time you're at empty, that's when people tend to crash. So it's okay to take maybe a day off or 2 days off. That's fine, because you need that time to replenish. You need that time to come back. But if you're just someone who's sleeping on time and you're just not doing the work, that's just a lack of discipline. You just have to do the work. There's no like golden formula on increasing your motivation. If you're not doing the work, you just have to do it. It's like my doctor told me for sleeping. The only cure for sleep deprivation is to just sleep. So if you're in this situation and your diet's fine, your sleep's fine, and everything's fine, you just have to do the work. There's really nothing special. There's no special source, no special formula. You just got to do the work. Really, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Anas. Now I'm gonna ask this question is not as much for mental health, and this is open to all panelists here. So if you'd like to just mention your name or just chime in and tell us what you think or what your, let's say, 2 cents would be. So when it comes to timetables for a week versus planning the next day, every single day. So let's say you have a plan for a day, and then at the end of that day, you plan for the next day. Now, we've spoken about why it's important to try and create a proper schedule, a proper routine of what you're going to do. So can you tell us, what do you think in terms of personally, do you think it's good to have a timetable for a whole week? Do you think we should plan every single day up till HSC? Do you think we should just plan the next day? and anyone can chime in here. So I'm just going to have that question
Okay.
open.
Okay, I'd like to contribute to this one. Me personally, I don't think it's good to have a schedule where it's like, all right, at 2 p.m. I'm doing this, at 4 p.m. I'm doing this. What I would rather you do is just have a daily checklist, just just a list of stuff that you want to get done throughout the day. Because me personally, I have a lot of spontaneous events. Like sometimes maybe, I don't know, my parents might need help from me. I'd have to go somewhere. So there's things that can't be helped, things that you can't like plan for. So I would just have a list of around 5 to 6 things that I would tell myself, you're going to do this today and you're not sleeping until you do it. That might be why I don't sleep enough. But anyways, you have that list and you can pretty much do it any time of the day. So instead of like having a strict schedule, okay, at 2 p.m. you're doing this, 4 p.m. you're doing that, you just have a list of stuff that you got to do throughout the day and you can do it whenever you want, whenever you can. For me, that's a lot more efficient because let's just say something spontaneous happens. It allows you to like replan your day. So instead of a set schedule, I believe it's a lot more effective to have a daily task list. Whether you want to write those tasks for the week ahead, the month ahead, that's fine. I just don't think it's a good idea to have it strictly scheduled to a particular time.
Okay, thank you, Anas. So as Anas has mentioned, that is, you could also try making a checklist for yourself. You don't have to plan every single day in terms of hours. And besides this, I'll also ask, so these are just general questions for everyone because I don't know who to pose these questions to exactly. So in terms of ideal activities or physical activities we should do every single day, or at least should aim to do throughout a week, could we, again, I know we've mentioned examples, could we again try and get some examples as to what activities we could do or should do throughout a week to keep ourselves healthy, just so that students have an idea of what activities they can use for themselves that they might be familiar with? Because I know some people might not be a fan of jogging, but maybe they prefer something else. So could anyone here just try and just give us some examples of physical activities they can do, just for students who are watching?
In terms of physical activity, I would just say anything that you can enjoy that doesn't really require a screen, whether it be walking, throwing a ball around, riding a bike, just anything that doesn't involve a screen can be considered activity, like any sort of physical activity. Get out of the room, go outside, get out of the house. It's always good to like leave the house, you know, just explore around. Like there's a world outside you. Like breathe proper oxygen. It's a lot better for you. You know, when you stay inside like an air conditioned room, you tend to feel a bit more stuffy, a bit more condensed, a bit unnatural in a way. So it's always good to get outside of the house. You don't need to necessarily jog, as you said. Like some students might not enjoy jogging, but yeah, anything that doesn't involve a screen should be fine.
Yep. And Dr. Habib Burawala and Dr. Sunil Prakasi, do either of you have any other examples of activities you would recommend to students? Or if you had a student approach you or ask, do you have any other, advice or activities you'd recommend to them?
Now, look, I think I agree. Anything which is going to bring you to the natural light, get you the fresh air, take you away from devices and so on, which also involves, some meaningful task is good. That doesn't have to be free, but I think it also gives you a break, as we spoke about. So you do need a break to really go back and refocus. Otherwise, it's just your engagement and your motivation to continue would rapidly decline if you didn't have the breaks and activity incorporated in a day. And that's why, while 60 minutes we spoke about physical activity is good, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe divide it into 2 or 3 small chunks and do that, if that's what, because it serves a number of purposes, and that is what I would really recommend. So I think this would need a drastic change for students to look at your schedule and look at, how you would now create your day. I think the big take-home message is what we've heard so far: adequate rest and sleep. The key also is, and I should mention here, and it is again to do with how the biological clock sets in and how we fall asleep. So to really initiate the sleep cycle, you really need to start to have a bit of a winding down before you actually can sleep. And that also would mean some reduction in exposure to the light and to the screen. The recommendations are probably 1 hour before going to the bed. So you just can't just switch off everything, and it's called sleep hygiene strategies. So sleep hygiene it is very important that students, think about that too. So you're not really glaring at the screen or devices just, and then 5 minutes, I'm just going to go sleep or something. Have a routine where you might have a winding down together. And that is important.
Yep. So sleep hygiene, try and not touch any devices, let's say an hour before you sleep. Would that be ideal?
So recommendations are an hour before going to the bed. And
Yep.
what it does help you go, I think fall asleep quicker. Because what also does it, if you can't sleep and you're feeling, anxious and stressed and you have negative thoughts going through your mind and you aren't able to sleep. And why? And then you actually get more even stressed that I'm trying to sleep. I can't get sleep because I'm very stressed. I'm very anxious. I'm depressed. I'm this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
What it is they don't realize is, well, have we really looked at the winding down? And that can include lots of activities. So it can include, some light, activities around that. And also, you might want to just look at maybe just reducing, having a warm shower, having just a bit of a relaxing period. Maybe if you don't need to do the prayers, do that before you go to bed. So you're really not engaged intensively in the study and then suddenly trying to go. So you have a winding down process, and it is important to set in your routine. So I think evening and night, it shouldn't really be the time when you're trying to remember lots and lots of things. It should really be first thing in the morning when your mind is really refreshed. You had it rested for 8 hours. Is restorative. We spoke about it, sleep as a restorative brain function. So we need to also look at how biologically we're going to align. What now we are talking about is peak performance. So what we are now looking at is how you're going to perform to your best of your capacity. Everybody is at different level. Everyone's brain function differently, body function differently. How do you optimize? So this is like an important to really shift the way how we do it. So rather than studying too late in the night and so on and neglecting all the cues, you're moving everything in the morning and early hours and during the day.
Yeah, thank you. And Dr. Sanober, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yes, of course. So, looking at the mental health side of things, I think it's important to also factor in self-care. Everyone's self-care is also important to staying motivated, feeling motivated. If we completely tell someone cold turkey, you cannot do any of the activities that you've ever liked to do, you're just going to 100% focus on studying. Of course, HSC is a big deal. You have to have that focus on studying. But if we deprive ourselves of things that do bring us happiness, do bring us joy, our motivation is going to lack. The anxiety, the stress is going to build up. So I'm not saying that we do the things we like every day, all day. It's about, looking at our schedule, looking at how much we need to study, how much we need to get done. And then, when I work with students who might be quite anxious, might be quite depressed as well, we think about activity scheduling. Okay, so this is what our day looks like. We have been studying 7 days a week. We've had absolutely no breaks. Then we look at, of course, our diet, we look at our sleep, we look at our physical activity. And we also say, maybe one of those days for a certain amount of time, I'll do the things that I like to do. That gives me a bit of that reprieve from the constant barrage of studying, of course. So that self-care looks differently to everybody. And, whether that's some people like playing a certain sport with their friends, going and do that for a couple of hours. Some people like to read, having a bit of a break, being able to step back, go into a different world and then coming back again is okay. Some people like more of the health and beauty things, so self-care looks different to everyone. I think scheduling that in so it's manageable and doesn't take over the studying time as well is also important. So just having that balance, but also being realistic in how much you need to get done as well.
Having a balance and also scheduling self-care. I'll also take note of that for myself as well. Thank you. And that should be the rest of our questions. Now I'm going to hand this over to, so thank you everyone, especially the panelists and everyone that's here with us. So Dr. Burawala, Anas, Dr. Sanober Kazi, also Dr. Khurufayani and Ms. Luthra, who's also with us, as well as the team who's behind us, Usman, Zawiya, Rayan, myself, Sharmeen. I'd like to thank all of them for being here and joining us today. Now I'm going to hand this over back to Shafqat Ali, and I'm going to just ask him to conclude.
You forgot Shazeen there. She's reminding me to unmute. That's good. I won't be long. Just a quick thing. We shared one link about the boosting breaks, what you asked me, honest, I want to reply that question as well. I use myself from this holiday. I learned, as I said, boosting breaks for a busy brains. The article I shared through the chat. I'm using myself for my own well-being. So I use skipping rope. Sean used shadow boxing, and walk. I use walk, and chat with each kid. I do chat, just something non-judgmental, just to check on each other, and the pray. So these are my boosting breaks, few of them. But if you have other sports and things, so read through that article and look at what you can afford at your home easily. Don't go something and ask your mom and dad, I need a punching this and I need a table tennis in my place. Do something you can afford, time-wise, resources-wise, and that should be fun, because that will give you what they call it in the driving. Your body is more like a car. They say revive, survive, drive, revive, survive. So same thing, you're there, you're driven your body. Now you need to revive it. You need a bit of break. So that's what we do, take over. So I'm just going to announce some of the things. Announcement was quickly. Our workshop for the holidays are full, which we are very much happy. Next week, parents will get all the information about how they're going to join. So looking forward to it. And the next one is, please like our Facebook. The whole today's show is on the Facebook. So if you find a friend who might get benefited, you can share a link, but you get a notification about our upcoming live shows and workshops and events and the activities. Please like our Facebook page. And at the end, I just want to thank all the panelists, Shayan, for having being an MC, and the team behind it, who are the silent soldier. Every week we bring new shows, and this week was very important one, a special one. And we went a little bit over time, but it was all the question needed to be answered. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, and look after yourself, and have a great exam. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.